Hello, my friends. May will be here before you know it, and our next cohort of Collaborative Families starts on May 1st. Collaborative Families is a virtual, live, welcoming parenting class that I teach for 3 months over the summer. We're evidence-based and neurodiversity affirming. The course is designed to improve your family's relationships, your communication together, and your trust by the end of the summer. You can learn more if you go to neurodiverging.com/parenting. Our early bird registration discount of $100 off ends this Sunday, April 7th. And also, just so you know, to help you learn more about the program and decide if it's the right fit for your family, I'm pleased to host a free, casual, non-salesy Q&A and info session this Friday. Again, go to neurodiverging.com/parenting, and right at the top, you can register to save your spot and get the Zoom link. Please bring your questions and your family situation so we can figure out if this is the right place for you or if I can refer you to other resources. The session will be recorded for those who can't attend live. I can't wait to see you there. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Neurodiverging podcast. My name is Danielle Sullivan. I am your host. I'm very happy to be here. For folks that are new, I run Neurodiverging Coaching, which is a sliding scale coaching practice that supports all kinds of neurodivergent folks. We do work with a lot of autistic and ADHD folks, but we also work with folks who have had post-traumatic stress disorder, who are recovering from head trauma, who have executive dysfunction, or are bipolar or OCD or any of those things. So if you label yourself as neurodivergent and you are looking for coaching support, check out neurodiverging.com and see what we've got going on. And you can schedule a free 20-minute call to see if it's a good fit for you. Okay, enough of that. I'm trying to be better about letting people know like who I am and where I'm from in case you are new here. But today is actually a really good day to be tuning in. You may be aware, many of you may be aware, that it is Autism Awareness Month here in the US. I don't know if this is a global holiday, but it is in April in the United States is Autism Awareness. And who knows what that means? We are here, we are aware of ourselves already. So I don't think I need to talk to you at this podcast about it, but I did want to think about a population of autistic folks that I think could use more support than we have, and that is autistic parents. I know I came into this space originally. I started the podcast and later on became a coach specifically because I was a newly identified autistic parent with newly identified kids, and I was struggling hard and could not find the resources, any resources that were supportive to me. I struggled really hard to find something that worked for my specific family, our personal values, our needs and wants, our goals, and also our particular like neurological needs. And so today I'm going to talk about how we went really from disaster disaster family with two newly identified neurodivergent kiddos, myself newly identified, and really struggling with the changes required to become a parent, as well as understanding what we all needed to feel okay. I'm going to be talking about that today and how I got from that place of just feeling chronically burnt out and overwhelmed and struggling every day to want to get up in the morning and into a place where we're doing real well. We have good days and bad days just like everybody else, but the good days far outnumber the bad. And when we do have, a struggle of some kind as a family, I always trust now that we will figure it out. I always trust that we are connected and we trust each other and that we can solve any problem. And that is something I could not have imagined 10 years ago when I started as a new parent. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Before I dive into that, I do just always want to say thank you to my patrons over at patreon.com/neurodiverging, and welcome to new folks. If you missed it, we hosted an executive function boot camp a couple of weeks ago, and it went so far beyond what I could have imagined. I'm so thrilled, and I know we have some new folks who found us through that boot camp. So welcome to the podcast, and if you're a patron, welcome to the Patreon. This month in the Patreon group coaching tier, we are focusing on self-compassion as neurodivergent people, how to create more self-compassion, how to handle resistance against wanting to have self-compassion for ourselves. and understanding internalized ableism, where it comes from and how to disrupt it. So that's what we're going to be working on. I say this month in April, but probably in May as well. So if you're interested in that, come join us. You can always join for a month or two and then cancel if you want. No harm done, no hard feelings. I do just want to say I often don't talk about my kids on this podcast, despite being a parenting coach, and I feel like I could use that to talk about my kids a lot. I really do want to respect their privacy and their agency and their autonomy as individual people, but I do feel like I can talk about my experience as a parent, and I just want to leave that wide open that I'm not trying to speak for them, and I'm not trying to say that they had the same experience I did. I am speaking completely from my own perspective of what was going on with them, and I will probably continue to not talk about them too much on this podcast. I had my kids when I was around 30 and um, had my first right. I think he was a month old when I graduated from my master's program. And then I had my second when my first was 22 months old. So they were just about 2 years apart. The first year they were both under 3. My son didn't speak really at all until he was about 4 for various reasons. And he didn't really speak. I could always understand him because I was a stay-at-home parent, but he didn't speak in a way that other people could really understand him until he was closer to 5 and maybe even a little older. So he was really reliant on me. And once she got old enough, his sister to translate for him. And he still to this day is sometimes not understood by folks, so it's a lot better. My daughter is one of the most energetic people I know. But when she was younger, and I don't know this like I have not had this tested. This is my opinion. I think she probably has one of the most high need sensory systems I have ever encountered. And she also has that sort of ADHD wish for dopamine and adrenaline, um, which is amazing now that is older. She's 9 now. But when she was younger, what that meant was that she spent a lot of her time during the day seeking dopamine. And that meant she did things like lock herself in rooms with the cat so she could pet the cat. And in one instance, I had to send her brother through a crawl space in our basement to unlock the room for her. One time she locked herself in a different room. I had to kick it down. Literally kick it down. I kicked through the door and my partner came home from work and I said, I'm really sorry, we need a new door, because she was too small to unlock it herself, but she locked herself in. And don't you worry, we took the frickin' locks off the door after those 2 instances. She would run into streets. We actually got her one of those backpacks with a leash on it, which prior to becoming a parent myself, I looked down so hard on those parents who had their kids attached by a leash, because I was like, how gross is that? That like your kid is attached to you. I'm so sorry, parents. I understand now. It was not my preference, but it was like I had to keep this kid safe. She would just run into traffic. She would run away in parking lots. If there was a plane overhead that startled her, she would run away. Um, she would climb fences. She would climb stairs and jump off them. She would climb structures at the park and get stuck up there because it was too high for her. She really kept me on my toes. And when I was younger and I didn't know I was autistic yet, I had no idea what the sensory system was. I didn't know what interoception was. I didn't know what proprioception was. I had no knowledge about any of this. I really only started learning about neurodivergence past like the stuff everyone gets from the bad movies and comic books and, stuff on TV like The Good Doctor, where you're like, that's not even a reasonable depiction of an autistic person. But that's what my understanding of autism was prior to having my kids. And then once my son was diagnosed when he was around 4, and I was diagnosed a couple years later, but I think I started self-identifying around the time that he was diagnosed, because I had done all this research to get him assessed and realized, oh, it's me too, and probably other people in my family. Anyway, especially with my youngest child, who was always highly sensitive from the time she was born, cried for hours every day, would have these huge meltdowns, did all the dopamine seeking like I was just describing. I was extremely run down and extremely hypervigilant in her preschool years, especially because if I looked away from her for a minute, she might actually kill herself. And the amount of stress that I was under as a parent, and especially again as an undiagnosed parent, so I wasn't doing any self-care. I didn't know how to regulate. I didn't know how to how to rest appropriately. I didn't know any of this stuff. Made me a crappy parent. I was extremely short with my kids. I had no energy. I slept a ton. I would go hide in my room in the dark during their nap times. And I slept, I took a nap literally every single day that they were in preschool briefly. And I think they were in preschool. I think I dropped them off at 11:30. I picked them up at 2:30. I was asleep from 12 to 2:15 every day. Um, I was so low energy. And then my partner, their dad would come home around 5:30 for work, and I would go in my room and turn the light off and hide under my covers until I finally fell asleep at 10. And then I'd be up multiple times during the night because I nursed, and I was just really struggling. My partner was also a first time parent. He didn't know, like, he was also struggling, to be frank. And I'm not going to tell you, like, it's his story, right? But from my perspective, I think he was struggling too. We expected that um, the things that worked for other people would work for us too. That, like, oh, if daycare works for other people, and if bottle feeding works for other people, and if preschool works for other people, our kids will have that too. Our kids would not frickin' bottle feed. We tried everything. They would not sleep through the night. We tried everything. I worked at the baby sleep site for almost 10 years, and I started there because my kids would not sleep through the night. And also, the baby sleep site is amazing, and the people there are amazing. And I'm not being paid to say this, but if you are having trouble with your kids' sleep, you should go check them out. They're really, really, really wonderful people. And it was just really, really, really hard. I was so run down. So because, like I said, I graduated with my master's when my first child was a month old. I think it was literally his 1 month birthday, and we went. And my instinct when confronted with a problem, I'm much better about being intuitive and listening into my own self nowadays, but especially 10 years ago, my instinct was to research. I read at least 50 parenting books and probably more. I especially sought out the ones that were well recommended. I asked my boss at the baby sleep site and the other sleep consultants there. I asked my pediatricians. I asked my friends. I did have several friends who had kids, and they recommended things to me. I read so much. And all of the parenting books that I was running into were so, they just did not align with my values in any way. One really popular one that a lot of folks like and a lot of folks recommended to me was Love and Logic. And I might be able to approach it differently now. I have not reviewed it in the last 10 years. So one of the premises of Love and Logic, to my memory, right, is that you give your child autonomy by offering them choices, but you control as a parent what those choices are. So you can wear the blue sweater or the red sweater today. These are the choices. It felt so pedantic to me. Even then, I should have known I was autistic. I was like, but clearly there are more choices. Like, your kid is not an idiot. Clearly your kid knows that there's more than just the red and blue sweater. So you're like, and this is my reflective of my interactions with my kids too. Like, my kids are not, even young kids, they're not like unaware of what's happening around them. Like, they know that they have more sweaters than blue and red. And me saying you can only wear these two is like using my authority. It felt really gross. It felt like I was using my authority for controlling purposes. And I have never wanted to be a controlling parent. And I was for several years because that's what all the resources were telling me, right? They were telling me to be controlling. They were telling me that I'm responsible for my kids' behavior. And I am, to some degree, right? I'm responsible for modeling and teaching ethics and teaching, but I'm not responsible. I don't believe in punitive punishment, just inherently. It's gross. It feels bad. Like, I understand why people get to the point where they do it sometimes, because that emotional regulation when you're dealing with a kid who you feel like keeps trying to kill herself is like really hard. And I'm not going to say that I never got to the point where I thought about whacking somebody. But I also just, my personal values are inherent human dignity and worth. Every single human has inherent human dignity and worth, and that includes children. And all these books I was reading, they were like, be nice to your kid so that you can control them better. That's what it felt like it boiled down to for me. All of the ones I read were be nice to your kid or try these other tactics so that you can control them better. It was it felt manipulative. It was using the trust that you're garnering with your kids and the trust they're giving you back in a hierarchical way. And I just didn't like that. It was not my jam, y'all. That's like the best I can say. And most of these books, some of them had like better like practical tactics for how do you talk about a difficult thing, for example. But the root of all these books was in this sort of hierarchy paradigm, this dominance paradigm of the parent is up here and the parent is the authority and the children fall under her. And that's patriarchy at its root, right? The pater familias up here, and then the woman, the wife, and then the children, right? And I am not into that. And if that works for y'all, that's like, I'm not trying to judge you, but for me, it felt like it violated my understanding of the human rights that are so important for me to give my children and for me to make sure that my children understand they have access to. One of our 101 things we started learning about when we started homeschool in the pandemic was what are children's rights. Like, I got the book from the library. It's a hardback book. I'll try to put a link below, about children's rights. And it talks about how children have the right to bodily autonomy. They have right to clean food and water. They have right to education and healthcare and all these things. And it's like, those are basic human rights. And I want my children to know that they deserve those so they can ask for them if they feel those rights are being violated. Anyway, all these books I was reading were not jiving with me and my way of doing things. But at the same time, I was getting all these messages that my kids' challenges were my fault, right? And I'm sure that their dad got some of those messages, but I do feel like it often falls on the mother, right? The woman in a heterosexual couple, or what looks like a heterosexual couple from the outside anyway. I was getting these messages that as a mother, I was failing. As a mother, I was doing a bad job. As a mother, my children were, injuring themselves, jumping off of high things and locking themselves in rooms and whatever. At some point, and I bet I was just at the library, like desperately looking for parenting books, but I couldn't tell you for sure. I bumped into this book by Howard Glasser, and I have like 3 copies in my house, and I couldn't find any of them for this. So I'll put a little picture here and a link below. Howard Glasser developed this approach called the Nurtured Heart approach, and his book is Transforming the Difficult Child. And I think I saw the words difficult child, and I was like, yep, that's what I have. I will put a couple of links to this approach in the show notes. It was the first model of parenting that I saw that really spoke to me, that really seemed like the author was trying to establish trust in the family for the purposes of having a connected relationship as opposed to control or training obedience in kids. And I kind of immediately started using some of the easier strategies that he suggests with my kiddos. And I will just say my eldest kiddo is sort of like the typical eldest kiddo where he's pretty he's definitely like autistic ADHD, but he's I've never needed to over explain things to him. I do feel like we've always understood each other really well. We have similar perspectives and similar ways of thinking. But from when she was born, I had a lot of trouble understanding my daughter's mindset, framework, understandings of the world. What she is getting in from the world, I think, must be so vastly different than what my nervous system is taking in from the world. Because a lot of times we just fly straight past each other. And it wasn't for lack of effort when she was younger, but it was just, I really struggled to feel like I understood her and knew her and could support her in the way she needed support. When I started using the Nurtured Heart approach, we kind of had immediate results, immediate changes in our family dynamic, in her ability to trust me. I'm not going to say it's the perfect parenting system for me personally. It is really good. And it really got me to where I am now in terms of understanding the roots of the parenting structures that I want to be present in my household with my family. But one of the most valuable things it taught me is that old standard by now that behavior is communication. In my house, behavior was good or bad growing up. And I had pretty gentle parenting parents, but still behavior was good or bad. And if you did something bad, then you were bad. And Howard Glasser was the first sort of brain-based education I received on the idea that behavior is just information for the parent and that we don't have to take that behavior personally. And it also doesn't mean anything about the kid and the kid's like moral inclinations, right? Um, that was mind blowing for me at the time. And since then, I've read a lot of Ross Green and a lot of Mona Delahook and Ginger Healy and other authors who are doing this brain based, nervous system based work. But at the time, Howard Glasser was, I think, my first exposure to that. The second thing that I realized from Howard Glasser, and I think Howard Glasser is also possibly the reason I got into positive psychology so much, that I hadn't thought about it till right now, so I might have to think about it first. But one of Howard Glasser's like easy to implement suggestions is stop noticing what's going wrong or what your kid is doing wrong, big scare quotes, and start noticing what's going right, even if it's tiny. And start positively praising the things that you are happy about. I started that, and within a week, my daughter and my relationship was massively better because she was so dopamine seeking. She was doing so much all the time that I had felt like I had to say no and watch out and be careful, like constantly. When I was able to sort of shift my lens and start looking for the things that were going well, I was able to notice like how many no's she was getting compared to how many yeses. That's awesome. Good job that she was getting. And that widened my frame so much to recognize that I really needed to be noticing what she was doing well so she could know what to do. Because all I was telling her was what not to do, which is not helpful. Like, okay, mom doesn't like it when I jump off the stairs like this. Well, what if I jump off this other way? Well, what if I jump off a different stair? Well, what if I do it? Like, it wasn't enough information. When I started saying, I really appreciate that you looked where you were going before you jumped off the stairs, that was when she was able to take positive information and say, oh, okay, this is the safe way to do this. I will do it like this from now on, and make her own decisions about that. So giving her really specific positive feedback and reducing my no's or reframing them into just way more neutral things like, I noticed that you're really high up on the stairs and I'm concerned that if you jump from there, you might hurt your feet. Is there a way? What do you think? Do you agree, disagree? How can we solve this problem? And that's the way I handle things now, is give them the chance to think about the thing. But my hyperreactivity and my fear of somebody getting hurt was getting in the way of me being able to actually connect, right? And that was something that Howard Glasser gave me that I will forever be grateful for. Once I found Glasser, I had sort of stumbled into the books for parents of quote unquote difficult children. And then I was like, oh, okay, there are people out here who kind of get this. But still, none of these people were saying the words at the time. I think now Howard Glasser has ADHD on his website, maybe. But when I was reading, nobody said ADHD, nobody said autistic, like they were scary bad words. So it was really hard to find those books. And I'm so grateful for people like Amanda Diekman, who are now writing books that specifically say, I am autistic, my kid is autistic, because just from a accessibility standpoint, those words needed to be there because I couldn't find them. But still, Howard Glasser, to my knowledge, at least his book at the time, the 10-year ago version of the book that I initially read, didn't speak to autistic parents. And so Howard Glasser on his own, as much as that book helped me, wasn't enough. I really had to dig into positive psychology, the work of Dr. Seligman, the work of Dr. Ross Green, Mona Delahook. I had to dig into nonviolent communication strategies, and just so many other things to find a parenting system that really felt based in trust and not on compulsion. Because I think a lot of parenting systems are like top level based on trust, but then once you start really digging down, they're based on obedience. And I don't want to, and this might just be the most autistic thing I've ever said, I don't want to raise obedient little automatons. I want to raise people who are whole and can trust themselves to make good decisions, and who have basic social emotional learning skills and communication skills. And that has always been more important to me than whether they get their math homework done. Because you can freaking learn math when you're 60, if you need to, yes, it's better for us to do some things when we're younger. But I just think that we push our kids to do so much so quickly, and it creates so much trauma for them, and especially if they're neurodivergent. And when I think back at the trauma I experienced in school that I really wasn't aware of until much later, I really wish someone had spent more time teaching me nervous system regulation skills and communication skills and positive communication skills and those kinds of things, and not, how to do polynomials, even though I really love doing polynomials, actually. I've never needed to use polynomials in my life. I've needed to use communication skills every single day, and I was never taught them, not once. So, anyway, so the reason collaborative parenting really made a huge difference in my life is it enabled me to pull together all these pieces and structure them and create a model that then other people can use to set their kids up to be real human beings, real independent, autonomous, interdependent human beings who can work together toward a future that requires all of us to be the best we can be and to use our talents the best we can. There's a story I think I've told to a couple of clients, but I don't think I've talked about it on this podcast. I think it was the first week that I started using the Nurture Heart approach. And I was still feeling very uneasy about it. One thing that any of these styles of parenting ask you to do is to give up some of your power and give it to your kid. When we're moving from a hierarchical relationship into an equal relationship, right? If you have more power, you're going to have to give some of it away to your child so that you're on the same level now. And that can feel extremely challenging and difficult and vulnerable in a way that I had not really been familiar with before, because I've done anti-racist work and I've done a lot of similar-ish work where you're trying to really find equity, but that was with other adults. I had never been in a situation where I had to give power away to someone smaller than me before. My daughter and I had gone to pick up her brother from childcare after school, and we got there and picked him up and went outside and we were on the sidewalk. And I don't remember what the instigating thing is, but she had a meltdown. She got incredibly overwhelmed, was sitting on the pavement, crying, screaming, really upset. And I started to get this rising tension in my body because I wanted to get home. My son had been out at school all day, which was stressful for him. And I wanted to get him in the car. I wanted to go home. I think I was hungry. I need to make dinner. I just had in my head all the stuff I had to do. And then I remembered that we were trying this new thing, and that my kids' feelings were just as important as my feelings, and that what she wanted was just as important as what I wanted. And I also remembered that one thing, I think this isn't Howard Glasser, but it might be in Ross Greene. One of the things I had read that I really, really found very helpful immediately was to move slower, to give kids more time to respond, to recognize that processing speed might be bigger for some of us, especially neurodivergent people, though they did not use the word neurodivergent. So what I used to do is I'd used to be like, hey, what do you want for dinner? Hey, did you hear me? Hey, what do you want for dinner? Hey, did you hear me? And that was overwhelming my kids. So what I instead did was I would go up and I would say, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? Can you pause the TV? And then when they agreed, then I'd say, hey, what do you want for dinner? And then I'd give them the full 30 seconds. And then if I still didn't hear anything back, I'd be like, can you tell me where you're stuck? Or did you hear what I said? Or do you want me to say it again? Those kinds of things. So anyway, I remembered that piece of advice, and I got down on her level and I said, I see you're really upset. What's going on? And all I remember, I wish I could remember what started it, but all I remember was she was saying, I don't want to get in the car. I'm not ready to go in the car. We can't go in the car. And I told her, okay, we will not go in the car until you are ready. But she didn't believe me. And it wasn't even her fault, because I had been a coercive parent for all of her life at that point. I think she was probably 2 or 3. She was probably 3. And for those 3 years, I had been very insistent that she do what I said. And so she didn't trust that when I said we didn't have to go in the car till she was ready, that we would actually not go in the car. So I was trying to think, I tried to verbally reassure her and she wasn't accepting it, which I very much understood even in the moment. And I was like, well, how can I get her to understand that I really want to help? And so I gave her my car keys. And I had visions in my head of this 3-year-old, chucking them into the bushes or, I don't know, hiding them or her throwing them into the parking lot and a car running over them, right? And we being trapped at the kinder care until somebody else came to get us. But I was just like, I need to show this kid that she can trust me when I mean that we don't have to go in the car until we're ready. So I gave her the keys and I said, here, you take these keys. And now we cannot get in the car until you are ready because you have the keys. And I don't know exactly, I can't speak for her, but she stopped crying. She started breathing with me. We solved whatever the problem was. She gave me the keys back and we went home. And it was this incredible experience for me because it was a time that I really leaned into being vulnerable and was deeply rewarded for it by a very positive experience with this kid that until then I still felt very disconnected from. And I was really starting to feel like we'd never have a good relationship and we'd never solve problems together and we'd never be on the same page. And it still took a lot of time and a lot of practice and a lot of effort. But nowadays we are 92% on the same page and we trust each other. And I wouldn't have that if I hadn't tried something completely different. If I hadn't dug into my intuition around democratic parenting, around non-hierarchical parenting, around collaborative parenting, and really stuck with it. I wanted to tell this story because I haven't talked about it in depth before. And I work with a lot of parents, and I know a lot of you are struggling with similar things. And I was afraid to betray my daughter's trust in talking about our relationship together. But in thinking about it and talking with her about it, I really came to the conclusion that if this can serve other people, that if my experiences and my understandings of what I went through can serve other people and make you feel less alone, and also let you know about some tools that are out there that maybe would work for you, that it was worth telling it, even if it's a little vulnerable, and even if I probably won't talk about my kids that much, in future episodes. So I hope that was helpful, and I really appreciate you being here today. Thank you so much for my patrons for supporting the Neurodiverging podcast. This Autism Acceptance Month, let's focus on what our next generation needs. Let's look at what our autistic kids are telling us about the kind of society that they want to live in, and let's look for some actionable steps that we can take to get us all there. Thanks so much for being here. Please remember, we are all in this together.